Hey everyone, welcome to the PaleyFest Fall TV Previews. I'm Dalton Ross, Executive Editor-at-Large for Entertainment Weekly, and I'm super pumped to be your host for this special conversation celebrating AMC's new series, Anne Rice's Interview with the Vampire. And before we go any further, we'd like to extend a big thank you to Citi, the festival's official card and official sponsor, for their help making this program possible. So, many of you may be fans of Anne Rice's groundbreaking Gothic novel on which this show is based. Others might know the 1994 film with Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt rocking some pretty sweet hairstyles. Well, now AMC, the network that gave us shows like The Walking Dead and Breaking Bad, has joined forces with the producers and actors you're about to meet to bring a brand new iteration of that beloved story to television. This series chronicles the life story of vampires Louis, Lestat, and Claudia, as their story of love, blood, and the topsy-turvy ups and downs of immortality is told to journalist Daniel Malloy in what I have to say, by the way, is a very swanky Dubai apartment, very swanky. And look, I don't want to brag or anything, but I did get to see the first two episodes a bit early, and I am totally hooked. It's scary, it's sexy, it's psychologically intense, it's gorgeously shot, even when blood is not spurting all over the place, although that helps. Bottom line, you're going to be psyched to check this out. Anne Rice's Interview with the Vampire premieres on Sunday, October 2nd at 10 p.m., right after The Walking Dead on AMC, and you can see the first two episodes that same night on amcplus. Okay, with all that now said, I'm thrilled to welcome in the folks who put this dark gift of a show together. Joining us, our executive producer of the show, Mark Johnson. He's the writer, creator, and executive producer, all wrapped up in one, a true triple threat, Rolin Jones. He plays the interviewee and fledgling vampire Louis. Jacob Anderson is here.
Oh.
Our next guest bears his fangs as the dashing bloodsucker Lestat. Cover your necks, everyone. It's Sam Reid right there. Completing this dysfunctional vampire family as Claudia, Bailey Bass, is in the virtual house.
Nice.
And he plays the man doing the interviewing in Interview with the Vampire as Daniel Malloy. It's Eric Bogosian. Welcome, everyone. It's great to have you all together. This is super fun. And Rolin, we'll start with you. We have a very famous book.
Yeah.
We have a very famous movie. There's the book. People are very familiar with both of those things. So let's just start super big picture. How is this series similar to what people have read and seen before? And in what big ways is it different?
Well, I think that the first thing that we have is that we have AMC bought all the books. She bought the entire catalog. And so we were able to kind of I think we forced every writer who worked on it to read at least the first 5, just to have a knowledge about that. And I think the things that are similar, right? We are in New Orleans. All the major characters are there. And generally speaking, all the major plot points of the novel are there. And tasked with 2 things, right? One, bring a generation of people who don't know anything about this, who do not know it as the Citizen Kane of vampire movies and or the Ur documents for Vampire World, and take the people who are beloved fans and give them something so that they're not just waiting to hit every point that the movie hit. There's something surprising and new. Make it new for everybody that was on there, giving a thrilling experience. So the basic giant big changes are. I'll do one for every square here. Eric Bogosian, Daniel Malloy, is now an older man, much, much better at his job than he was in 1973 when he had his first interview, which is part of our show. It is the same Daniel Malloy that is in the novel. The first one took place in 1973. This one is taking place in 2022. Louis de Pontelac is now a Creole man whose money was accumulated from the plantation that was in the novel. But we have sort of thrust that into early 20th century. One of the things we wanted to do was, if we were going to not tell the Gothic plantation story, we wanted something that had a certain sort of sensory overload, and there isn't a hotter, more exciting time for New Orleans than the birth of jazz and the early 20th century. Claudia for practical reasons and for exciting new reasons going forward. Is Claudia, who was trapped in the body of a 14-year-old with all the chemistry pre-puberty or in the middle of puberty that goes in her body. While her mind changes, she is trapped in that body going forward. And Lestat is some primordial version of the Brat Prince, the Lestat that canonized, that went from book 2 on out. And we have thrown him back into this book. And other than that, you're off and running.
So that a lot to get to, and we're going to get to each of those with each of the actors in terms of their characters. But you also mentioned, Rolin, it's not just one book. AMC bought 18 books. So Mark, Rolin sort of talk about taking maybe stuff from other books. So like when you take a look at this world, how does what we're going to see here with Interview with the Vampire tie into other plans you may have up your sleeve for other projects down the line or this show down the line?
It's an interesting question, and the answer is twofold. One, not at all, and the other one is in many ways. Anne Rice has she has themes, she has characters, she has stylistic flourishes that connect all of these books. I think it's very hard to pick up an Anne Rice book and not 15, 20 pages in know that it's Anne Rice. And I think that's how these various series will be connected. They're all under that umbrella. At the same time, there's no need to overtly connect them. So we're also shooting at the same time right now, the Mayfair Witches. Well, at first glance, they are not connected. That's not connected to Interview, but you will see beyond just the Easter eggs, of which we will have plenty, that there are, as I say, the world is connected, the characters are connected. I think it's all of her stuff is about transformation of different kinds and acceptance. And quite frankly, I hate to use the expression, but very acutely about the human experience.
I mean, Jacob and Sam, I feel like the show would not work unless the chemistry is there between Louis and Lestat, right? Like there's a lot riding on that. So how did you two form this immortal bond, if you will, during filming, knowing how important it was?
We just spent a lot of time together, even when we didn't need to. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. Like, how would you put that kind of thing into words? I really love Sam. I like spending time with him. I like working with him. I find like the way that we talk about like what we do. Well, like, we're not just talking about what we're doing all the time, but just like, I think we have like a similar language. I don't know. It's like, how do you describe a vibe?
Sam, how do you describe the vibe?
I mean, I think it's the work, the world, and the characters are so extreme, and it's quite an intense thing to do. And I think we lent on each other a lot throughout the process, and we're very grateful, I think, for the friendship that we had built to be able to get through 6 months of night. Or 5 months of night, however long it was, some pretty intense scenes, and to have someone that you can kind of look across the room and have a giggle, private giggle, and get on with your job, and debrief with at the end of the day is invaluable, because chemistry with actors, I think, is a complicated beast, because it is our job to manufacture it, really, but when you don't have to, and it just comes naturally, it makes everything so much more easy and enjoyable. And particularly when you're, nude and bleeding, and you're really happy you have a buddy. Yeah, these circumstances. Yeah.
Coffin for two. So yeah, I was saying that the Entertainment Weekly suite when all you guys came through for Comic-Con out at the Hard Rock Hotel, and I mean, like, I was watching you all interact. I mean, Bailey, break it down for me. These two, do they have a super bromance going on? Like, what is happening?
They're best friends. They really are. It's really precious. So look at Jacob's face. They are.
My best friends, Sam.
Yeah.
They are.
I have to say, I have to throw in, I have two sons who are roughly the age of these guys. And we all went over to Comic-Con, us three, and walking around. And it was like being with my kids. I mean, it was like the two of them are just like together getting into everything. And I'm like following them around like, wait a second. Let me catch up with you there. But I didn't really get it when I first got to set. I didn't understand what was going on with these two guys because they were so happy and they were so tired and they were so bonded. And I was like, what dimension have I entered here?
But it's sweet. It's sweet.
Jacob, one way in that the series is different from the source material is that this show does not shy away at all from how Louis' race plays a big factor in this new story. Tell me about leaning into that new aspect of the character in the story.
I don't really need to lean, for one, because it's experiential. It's like there is a lot that I have in common with Louis, and a lot that I think quite often when you're adapting literature, particularly like really beloved classic literature, I think sometimes you can fall into the trap of like, well, we need to make this visually reflective of society, which is really important. And that like the importance of inclusion is absolutely not lost on me. But there's just like a different flavor, just like it's such a relief to know that it's baked into what you're doing, that it's not, this wasn't like colorblind casting. And I think it gives Louis and Claudia so much more to, I want to say play with, but also it just imbues like all of the melancholy and all of the dread and the grief and the trauma that Louis is carrying in his body. It's all kind of heightened a little bit more by how he's perceived by the rest of the world, or certainly by like the Caucasian world.
It's so key to the development of the story, and there's so many scenes I wish I could specifically ask you about, but we got to let people see that for themselves as it sort of unfolds. And Bailey talked about you and Claudia, and you're playing, as Rolin mentioned, an older version of Claudia that we haven't seen before. So how does that change the character and some of the things she might be going through at the age of her turning?
Although Claudia is older, it's the same essence that I feel and read in the book. It's, she's fiery, she's fierce, very feral a lot of the time. Claudia, she does her kills are very, very dramatic and just off instinct. But I always say it's a dream role because I got to experience all these emotions because Claudia feels so deeply. And that's part of her being 14 and stuck with all of these emotions, and all of these chemical imbalances that a 14-year-old would have, but she's stuck with that for the rest of her life. So then she is always going off what she feels rather than thinking first, which was really fun to explore.
I think one of the things people get excited to see are obviously about vampires are the fangs. Sam, I need to know what the fang. I heard you were being like shipped fangs to try, like they're Warby Parker glasses or something. Like what's that all about?
Well, I think because, of all the lockdowns across the world and, like right now what we're doing, I was in Australia when I did my first fang fitting, and you get like a 3D scan of your mouth done at the dentist. And then they make a mold of your mouth, and then you go through these design processes where they, design and print and make and hand paint these fangs. Yeah, so I've got about four different versions of Lestat's fangs at home, but yeah, they'll be shipped to me in these little packages. They'd arrive as little taped up boxes. It was like getting sort of contraband. I'd come on and make it. I've been sending Jacob pictures of like the different versions of the fangs, and yeah, I mean it's a really fun process. I mean they're cool things. I mean, also in the books, Anne Rice is very clear about the fact that you can't really see the fangs ever on a vampire. They're so small that you can't really notice them unless they want you to notice them. And so we do play into that rule that you can't really see the fangs unless, the vampires want you to see them. And when they really want you to see them, you can really see them.
I love, Eric, I love the scenes between Louis and Malloy, and Rolin mentioned it earlier. So how does Daniel, being about 40 years older here than the character in the book, sort of change the relationship? Look, I'm an interviewer, I'm a reporter. How does that change the relationship between interviewer and interview subject? Because he's no longer, the boy reporter. He's a seasoned professional.
Well, Louis is not a reliable narrator. Let's just start with that. And the novice interviewer just doesn't have the experience to sift through what Louis is saying and find the nuggets of truth in the middle of all of it. So I bring that to it. Also, the young guy has a very kind of sort of amorphous ambition. It's not really clear. He's young, he's hanging, he's following his intuition on things. But in the meantime, in the 49 years that have passed, Daniel has achieved great success. He's won Pulitzers. He's gone and gotten great stories. He knows how to get the story. He's good at it. So there's this very determined, willing to risk anything to get that story and really get it good. So that's a very different guy. I mean, in some ways, I'm a lot like this character. In some ways, I'm not. I mean, the amount of risk that this character, that Daniel is willing to take to get the story is about a level of ambition that you will see among like war correspondents and war journalists type of people who are right now today are risking their lives to get the story. So that's what he brings to it. There's a lot of other flavors in this thing, which you have to kind of watch the whole season to get all of it. But this guy, Louis, and we didn't talk about this a lot, but Louis knew Daniel when he was young. And that just brings up youth, his own youth, now that he's nearing the end of his life. It's like a nostalgia thing going on there. There's a lot of different colors and flavors that are really great to explore, and were really fun to explore with Jacob. I have to say that Jacob doing the role was a big part of me wanting to do the role, knowing that he could go deep. Some actors are afraid to go there, but when actors are not afraid to go there, it's like flying, and you feel the whole reality fall away, and you're in this zone together. And I felt, because a lot of time I'm listening to him, I felt we went there. I mean, I felt like I was being hypnotized by him sometimes. So I was.
Well, if you feel
still under your control.
The scenes are so tense between the two of you, and you clearly want something from the other person. And so, Jacob, what was it like from your perspective filming those scenes, and Louis' attitude towards Malloy, who he wants to tell his story to, but there's clearly a barrier between these two at the same point, even though there's familiarity?
Yeah, I think kind of that was really lovely, Eric. Thank you, for one. And for two, I think something that I love about that dynamic is that it's constantly shifting, and you're not quite sure who's kind of got the best hand as it goes along. And I think it's very clear in the beginning that Louis is holding all of the cards. He's holding all of the cards. He's like, and he's very, I think I said to you at some point, Eric, I was like, oh, but remember that I remember you at a certain age better than you'd remember yourself.
Right.
And don't forget that. I don't think I said that to you, but that like Louis, that's kind of the part of their dynamic. But there's a thing that happens within the first two episodes where I think Louis has like a slight moment of like, oh, hang on, I actually kind of care about this person. This person is a part of my story. And I think that those moments kind of like happen throughout the season where you see them like dancing around each other. It becomes more of a dance than just like a back and forth. It's not a sparring match. Exactly.
Yeah, it's bittersweet. There's something gets turned on between us, and then we fight it, and it goes back and forth. It was great to play.
It was really fun.
And of course, I mean, when maybe Mark and I are around roughly the same age, but when you get older, you do think back on all the things that happened in your life, and you're kind of wondering, okay, so how many more summers do I have in my life? How many, what happened to all the people I knew in my life? There's a whole different perspective on the way you see your life. And yet here's this vampire who's been living for like 100-something years. What are all the stories that he's seen? What are all the people he's seen? It's like a vibe. It's like a texture that runs behind everything that we're doing in this show of, mortality and life and memory and actually, who are you? You are all these people and things that you've touched and been around in your life. And this is all running certainly through Daniel. And I think it's running through all of them. I mean, in some ways, these other guys are resisting some of that, but it's got to be part of your story when your immortality is a bitch.
Well, put that on a T-shirt.
I know this from personal experience.
It's a tagline on the. Well, I mean, what is Daniel's concern factor that Louis is going to maybe at some point, take a break from the interview to, I don't know, eat him?
Yeah, that's always there, and that's part of the story that'll get told in the course. The power that Louis has over Daniel is pretty intense. But that's getting into the plotting of what happens over the various episodes, and I don't want to spoil anything, but it's there. It's there. I mean, we're all under some boot heel of something, and to some degree, I mean, he's in Dubai. He's trapped, kind of, too. I mean, I don't know. How does he get out of there if he wants to get out of there?
Scar on his neck.
Well, the scar on his neck, yeah.
Rolin, where did the concept come from in terms of starting with this second interview between the two? I mean, that's a pretty dramatic way to start.
There's a gauntlet, right, thrown at you at the beginning. It's like, we love the movie. We bought these books. We don't want to repeat the movie. Bring it up here and now. She brought it up in the book, it's 1973 or 76, depending on how you read it. The movie, it's clearly 1994, haircuts that you're talking about going in there. So we do the same thing here. I think the framing device works really well for the book and for the movie. When you start looking at 7 hours and having to, over multiple episodes, go back to Dubai, you have to have a compelling reason to go back to Dubai. Something has to be very active in those scenes. And so it just seemed to me to be an interesting thing. It's like, why don't we make him better at his job? Let's give him perspective. Let's always have some sort of invisible chain back to the book, but let's imagine if Malloy was on top of it and could talk about the inconsistencies and go after him. Changing the setting, a lot of stuff that Anne gets into in the later books, really dealing with vampire existence with, these things and the technology that's out there and how hard it is to hide and to be in the shadows anymore. And so I just sort of did a search about where privacy laws were the most extreme. And Dubai has some of the greatest privacy laws out there. You can get arrested potentially for taking a picture of somebody else. It's like, it's probably a good place very convenient for a vampire. And also wanted to place it in a way that was different from that sort of the room in San Francisco, that something has happened since then. He has lived a life, it is surrounding him, and choices have been made, and stuff that's in the end of the book where he had traveled is now in this environment. And so, again, part of the task was just to, one of the things I think they kept talking about is make it new for the fans too. Don't let them don't let them be constantly ahead and just see how they're going to do the thing that was in the book. The book is beautifully wrought, wonderful. But if you end up being, slavishly loyal to it, you're just going to be in the graveyard with all those other shitty adaptations, because she wrote a book, and that's why you write the way you do. I think one of the cool things we got to do, Dalton, was to take a lot of the prose that's so beautiful and so glorious, and figure out how to manufacture scenes where those suddenly became active words for the characters. So lovers of this book, if they're going to be wildly surprised at how much Anne Rice is in this adaptation.
Well, let's expand on that a little bit, Rolin, because we have a question for you that comes from our festival sponsor, Citi. What was the most challenging aspect of adapting this novel into a series? Are there any scenes or storylines that stick out the most to you in terms of a tough nut to crack in terms of how do we get this from page to screen?
Yeah. I guess it's the weight of the IP, right? It's rare now at this point to find any intellectual property that is sold over 100 million. And what is it market at 150 or something? Like, it's just, there's and you know, the weight of that thing and the level of passion. It's not like sold some books and this is like, you know, people's book lovers' 12th favorite book. This is the book, right? For a lot of people out there. And so you have a great responsibility to not be the guy that comes in here and assembles a team of writers to run roughshod over it. And so we read all of the books quite aggressively. No one was in our writers' room that hadn't tackled these first 5 books. There's a lot of reading before, and a lot of we're building, right? We're building this sort of universe, right? So it's not just putting in Easter eggs and being clever about it. There are given circumstances in book 2 that are wildly different than they were in book 1. And anybody who knows these books know that basically 2 through on is the real story. And Anne sort of said that the book 1 was like this sort of jilted lover's version of events. And I think it got very, very exciting, and it made all the changes. I mean, I might not come around to Jacob's character, to Louis being Creole, if I didn't go, oh, Lestat had been with Nikki, and he had been with his mom in some whatever way you want to say it. What if he's legitimately, honestly going there? What is he going to look for in a third companion? What mistakes have you learned from your first 2? Who's the person out there in New Orleans that will attract me, that is interesting to be with, to consider spending the rest of eternity with? And so it all just started to change, but you're always just kind of going back to the book. One of my favorite scenes writing is in the finale. You haven't seen it yet, but it is a scene all of subtext. And it is a scene that where one character basically says one last like arrow of love, and it's done with nothing but Anne Rice talking about New Orleans, and we were able to cultivate a scene of all of the beauty and the love that this character had for this city. Is the dialogue for the scene and the action of the scene is this other thing, and it was really super fun in the end. Became less intimidating and more a joy. Fertile soil to fucking crack open and dig around in.
The city is such a character. I mean, when I was watching it, I literally just had a hankering for a crawfish boil. I was like, I need to get a crawfish boil in me right now. I'm looking at all this stuff. Like, get me the potatoes and the corn. Sam, what was it like filming, in Jackson Square and down in New Orleans?
I mean, amazing. I mean, it was such a dream. Like, Jacob and I arrived, we just sort of started walking around New Orleans. We'd walk past the house, we'd go over to because we were, filming in the actual house that Anne set these characters, in the books. So we're actually going to the locations that she talks about. And it is incredibly satisfying walking around New Orleans, pretending and knowing that you're playing Lestat. I have to say, the locations are extraordinary. I mean, the city is so seeped into the book and all of her work, and she talks about it all the time, and we just don't shy away from that. I mean, it is a third, fourth, fifth character.
And Dalton, the thing you also have to know is to build part of the where we set it in Storyville, which doesn't exist anymore. We had to build the backlot. that actually that could fit in when you shot it and look, in the same way in all these locations that are there in Jackson Square. They built this. It's such a design tribe. They built this thing in between at an old Lowe's between a Taco Bell and a McDonald's. And we shot the hell out of this thing, and how fluidly it sort of merges with the actual locations in the French Quarter and the Marinette and all the other places that we shot in. It's really something else.
Amazing. Last one for you guys. You've been so generous with your time. Mark, you're overseeing this entire world, this universe, not just this show. Anything else you could say about it? Or any Easter eggs for the Anne Rice fans out there beyond all of the obvious things that they're going to be seeing in this show?
Well, I can't tell them about the Easter eggs. It's the whole point of an Easter egg is to hunt and find it. But there are plenty, and there are connections. There's some fun connections, and some somewhat obvious ones, and some very very hidden ones. And listen, it's a privilege. It's a real honor to be in this position because Anne Rice has given us so much, and an exploration of people. And I keep saying about New Orleans. New Orleans is a character in this, and New Orleans is in many ways the most un-American American cities, and it a little bit of everything goes, and that's what she embraces, and that's part of. Not that all of her stories take place in New Orleans, but I think the spirit of New Orleans is in all of her stories.
I can't wait for everyone to check it out and see what you guys have put together. Unlike vampires, we're out of time. Well
done, Dalton. Well done.
I couldn't resist. Guys, I couldn't. I thought all day.
You've been waiting for that.
It was good.
But I want to thank Rolin, Mark, Jacob, Sam, Bailey, and Eric for hanging out with us here today. This was super fun. I had a total blast. I also want to thank everyone for joining us for this special PaleyFest Fall TV Previews conversation. And thanks again to Citi for their support. You can enjoy more of these programs by clicking the subscribe button below. And just a reminder, if you want to see these folks when the fangs really come out, the season premiere of Anne Rice's Interview with the Vampires on Sunday, October 2nd at 10 p.m. Eastern on AMC and amcplus. Immediately following the premiere of a little show called The Walking Dead. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dalton.